Hello, friend. Welcome to Foundations, a series by Chrysalis Arts Ministries in which we talk about the vital importance of healthy foundations in our lives and what we can do to help with the process of foundational personal development. My name is Stephen Brown. I am the founder of Chrysalis, and I will be your host today. I hope that this episode helps spark positive transformation for you in your life, and through you to those around you. Now let's get started. To begin today's episode, I would like you to engage your imagination for a moment as I paint a word picture for you. I want you to picture a house. Maybe it's big and elegant, or small and cozy. Maybe there are vines growing on it, or a big tree in the yard. The house looks pristine. Not perfect, perhaps, but it's the kind of house you would see and want to live in. Now I want you to think about what holds that house together. Think of the walls, the careful framing that gives the house structure and strength, and the nails and careful construction that hold it all together, allowing it to carry all that weight even through earthquakes and storms. Now picture the foundation. It's not the most attractive part of the house. It's pretty much a cement slab or a series of connected cement walls or piers. You may not have thought about this part too much before because you don't usually see it. It's buried underneath the house, invisible, but it's the most essential part of the whole building. The foundation carries the weight of the house, anchoring it solidly to the ground. Now picture what would happen if that foundation had problems. Imagine if it was cracked, weakened, improperly built, or neglected. Perhaps there are termites or other things rotting out the wood that connects the house to the foundation. Would you still want to live in that house? Would you still feel confident that it could survive earthquakes and storms? The truth is, our lives are like that house. They might look nice to people looking at them from the outside. They might even look nice to us if we just pay attention to the outer decorative features. But if we look underneath at the foundations and structures of our lives, we might see things that leave us vulnerable to the storms of life. Even people whose lives look like the nicest and grandest and most desirable of houses may still have foundations that cannot carry that massive weight long term. Now let's quickly define more clearly for you what I'm talking about. When I say foundations, I'm referring to your inner self, your heart, soul, spirit, your inner development and well being. When I say structures, I'm referring to things like your daily habits, your purpose, your faith, the people who are like family to you, the core parts of your life that hold it all together. Storms of life are the external and internal forces that threaten our structures and foundations. This includes things like health challenges, financial challenges, natural disasters, the inner critic, abuse, addictions, and so much more. If the foundations and structures of your life are strong, solidly anchored, and held together well, they can withstand the storms of life, or at least provide a strong platform to rebuild after storms. But if your foundations and structures are broken, neglected, rotting, toxic, or infested with parasites, you are more vulnerable to the storms of life. So many of us are raised to pursue achievement in academics, sports, the arts, business, and even in our social lives. All worthy pursuits, of course. Yet, under the weight of all our relentless striving for achievement, the foundations and structures of our lives may be vulnerable and at risk of collapse if they do not receive the support they need. Sadly, most of our programs do not focus on developing and maintaining the foundations and structures of our lives, and in many cases, the pursuit of achievement may even become destructive to our healthy inner development. Ultimately, the result is that so many people are left vulnerable. When storms inevitably come, the damage can be quite severe, and most programs are not up to the task of supporting, repairing, or rebuilding that inner damage. I saw this firsthand over and over in my first 15 years involved in the youth development field, but I first experienced it in my own life, which brings us to today's story. I grew up in the Silicon Valley, which is one of the highest achieving communities in the world. Our culture here is pretty obsessed with achievement. I didn't feel that too much as a child, and I initially had a pretty happy childhood full of creativity and love. My foundations in childhood were pretty healthy to start with, although they did have some vulnerabilities that weren't really recognized at the time. But as I grew older, I realized more and more that I didn't live up to the standards set by those around me here in the Bay Area. The activities and experiences I had growing up were so often based on achievement, defining a person's worth by what they could do compared to others, or compared to performance based metrics like grades and scores, winning or losing. By those standards, I didn't measure up. I didn't know it at the time, but I had an undiagnosed chronic illness that affected every single part of my life. This made it impossible for me to compete with other people my own age, and this became more and more of a problem as I transitioned out of childhood and into my teenage years where achievement mattered more and the standards were raised higher. I struggled with unusual aches, pains, muscle spasms, inflammation, brain fog, fatigue, lack of strength and energy, and various other issues physically, cognitively, mentally, and emotionally. I became the kid who was always picked last in games and sports, the kid who always lost, the one who couldn't keep up with other kids. I struggled socially, and my behavior suffered as the illness affected me more and more, and as my body couldn't do what I wanted it to do and what other people thought it should be able to. I struggled in school as well, and in just about every other area of my life. It seemed like the only thing I was good at was making people mad at me. Even people with the best of intentions couldn't tell if I just had elevated childhood behavioral issues or if there was actually an underlying problem that wasn't apparent. Without any clearly visible cause, it just looked like I was being difficult on purpose. And that really made people angry. And some of them lashed out at me verbally or physically. Just a little at first, but more and more as time went on. I fought back the best I could, but words are my only defense, and fighting back that way only made people angrier and got me hurt more, and made it look more and more like I deserved it. In some cases, maybe I did, but gradually the destructive cycle I was caught up in escalated and turned into verbal, physical, emotional, and psychological abuse, both from people my own age and even from one or two adults. My childhood best friend became my worst tormentor, the one with the most anger and intimidation and violence. I felt unsafe, helpless, traumatized, and completely unable to protect myself. When I reached out for help, I was too often blamed, shamed, or punished. Sometimes I was threatened or manipulated into not reaching out further for help. Through the destructive, abusive words and actions of a few people and the lack of adequate support from others, I ended up feeling like garbage. Like I was worthless, disposable, unwanted, and unlovable. My sense of value was utterly destroyed. I felt like I had no place, no purpose, and no future. Some people tried their best to be kind and helpful, but they didn't really understand what was going on or how to help. Others chose to judge me or exclude me. Others simply ignored me. And whether that was intentional or not, it further added weight to the verbal abuse of those that said nobody liked me or cared about me. One psychologist even laughed at me in my therapy sessions. He seemed to think it was hilarious how upset and seemingly irrational I was. Even at church, where I went every Sunday with my family and sat right up front, I largely felt completely invisible, almost as if the sermons mattered more than the people listening to them. My childhood faith totally crumbled to pieces, further fueled by the fact that the people who were hurting me were Christians, and they were respected and admired by people in the Christian community. It felt like everyone loved the people who were hurting me and wanted those people in their lives, but their actions made it seem like they didn't feel the same way about me. The people who were hurting me were high achieving, good looking, charismatic, talented, successful, and had lots of friends. They checked all the boxes people tend to value in our society. But I just felt like an awkward, ugly, pathetic, talentless, annoying, embarrassing loser. A failure by every standard and measure of worth that I knew. I heard sermons about extraordinary love and grace, about caring shepherds finding and saving lost sheep who went missing. But for the most part, that was not my reality. I so badly needed an extraordinary amount of love, affirmation, understanding, patience, support, safety, and nurturing. I needed people and programs that were equipped to support me through the overwhelming darkness I was experiencing. But the storms in my life were so strong, I really needed more support than most people or programs are prepared to give. The reality is, our performance based society is almost entirely focused on the external, not the internal. And it's built for those in the top percentile, not for those falling through the cracks. Like many young people in crisis, I came to the unpleasant realization that the support systems that are supposed to help young people are often inadequate, non existent, inaccessible, or deeply flawed. I learned that the storms of life can be overwhelming, especially without adequate places of safety and support. I realized that I didn't live up to the standards and expectations and attributes people value in our society, and thus I did not qualify for their time, attention, affirmation, support, or love. I was living a nightmare and I couldn't escape. I was completely broken, and the further I was crushed into the darkness, the more it consumed me. Parasites crept into my life in the form of addictions and crippling fears and toxic, destructive habits and coping mechanisms and mindsets, which further eroded the crumbling foundations of my life, of my physical, emotional, and mental health. I escaped into the world of the internet, burying myself in online gaming and other things, and drowning my pain with candy, dessert, and junk food, which I hid from those around me. These unhealthy coping mechanisms consumed me, further adding to my feelings of helplessness and shame. I was terrified that people would find out, and I would be further despised and mocked and punished. I developed a severe, crippling obsessive compulsive disorder, driven by fear, guilt, shame, and trauma. I was haunted by the fear that if I didn't do this or that, people would find out about my addictions and coping mechanisms, and it would make their opinion and treatment of me even worse. It got so bad that it would take me like 30 minutes just to walk down the hall to go to bed because I had so many OCD things I had to do. My brain convinced me that if I didn't tap the wall a certain way or wipe out my footprints in the carpet, people would find out everything about me. That the full extent of my brokenness would be exposed, and they would see just how pathetic and disgusting I was. I was terrified that my abusers would torment and hurt me more, that everybody else would finally turn against me too. To an outsider, it may be hard to understand just how much shame and fear can overwhelm a person. How things like eating disorders or addictions or abuse, that may be very common problems, can seem like the end of the world if they were to become known. Like many young people, I couldn't understand how anyone could still love me or want to help me if they knew the truth. I reached a point of brokenness where I was so close to becoming a tragic or disturbing news headline. I looked for any way out, and the more I looked, the more I saw only one tragic possibility of escape. I wanted it all to end, and part of me wanted to hurt the people who had hurt me. But there was also a big part of me that just felt trapped, controlled, manipulated by forces I didn't understand and was utterly helpless against. I felt like there was this dark, evil cloud pressing in to crush me. I saw it in the eyes of the people hurting me. I felt it in my destructive habits. I saw it in my nightmares, and I felt it in the room when I woke from those nightmares. This darkness tormented and terrified me, and it seemed to laugh at my feeble efforts to fight it. The inner critic of self loathing lashed at me ruthlessly, reminding me over and over how embarrassing and pathetic and ugly and despicable I was. It echoed the voices of my abusers, telling me that people didn't like me, that they only pretended to like me, that I wasn't worthy of their love, that they would never love me if they really knew me. I desperately wanted to escape, but I saw no other way out. No helping hand, nowhere to turn, nowhere to run. I was a failure in everything that people value in young people in the Silicon Valley. With my undiagnosed health condition, I had limitations and challenges and issues that I didn't understand. This reality that was too often denied, even by medical professionals. I knew that I wasn't good at sports or school or any sort of activity that people valued, and that wasn't likely to change. But even if it did, I felt like I was too far gone, too broken, too worthless. I had fallen victim to addictions and coping mechanisms I couldn't beat, and I had made mistakes I felt like I couldn't come back from. I felt like there was no point, no hope. I had completely and utterly lost the will to live, and I totally shut down and hardened my heart as much as I could, not wanting to feel anything anymore. The pain and the loneliness and the guilt and shame were too much to bear. When you're in the midst of such overwhelming darkness, when your personal sense of value has been so thoroughly destroyed, it is hard to see any light, even from the people in your life who try their best to love and help you. My foundations had completely crumbled to pieces amidst the storms in my life. The beautiful exteriors ripped off, exposing the barren, unattractive mess that remained within. I needed the life equivalent of a master carpenter, a creator, someone who could completely restore and rebuild the tangled ruins of my life. And there were no people or programs in my life who had that level of expertise. Throughout all of this, someone I had been friends with as a child was fighting a long, hard battle with a life threatening illness. He too had a major storm in his life, but there was something different. His medical challenges were recognized and validated, and he was supported through it by a community of people that rallied around him. But there was more to it than that. He had a strong foundation and structure that I didn't, a special kind of deep faith that sustained him through it all, giving him an extraordinary amount of joy and peace, even amidst this horrible storm in his life. I didn't really understand this faith, but I wondered about it. I spent a lot of time thinking about death and life. I couldn't decide which one terrified me more. I was haunted by these thoughts and by the fear of what a failed attempt might do and how much worse that might make everything. It was then, sitting in the ashes and crumbled ruins of my life, that I realized there had to be something more to life. I cried out for help to the greatest creator and builder of all, to the God I wasn't even sure I believed in, the God I was quite sure couldn't possibly love someone like me, even if he did exist. I said a simple prayer, basically praying that if he did exist, would he show me something? Would he give me something to hold on to stay alive for? My cry for help was answered with a glimmer of hope, a clear sign that somebody had heard and cared. Specifically, I saw a movie trailer that I knew immediately was an answer to my prayer. It spoke straight to the silent longing of my heart. Following that answer led me to a life changing experience watching the movie at a movie theater. The movie itself spoke straight to me. It showed me that there was hope. It was all about a total loser, an outcast, a pathetic man without a foundation, somebody with no friends or healthy relationships, somebody with deep pain and trauma from their childhood, somebody who had money and privilege but absolutely nothing of substance to truly live for or to carry them through the storms of life. It showed how this person went through a development process that totally turned their life around and helped him become somebody better, somebody who could actually help other people, somebody with a strong, healthy foundation, somebody with a life now full of love and true friendship and meaning and purpose. Someone no longer haunted by the trauma of his childhood and no longer controlled by the toxic people he had previously been surrounded by. He still had challenges, he still had loss, he still faced pain, but he was now different, a truer, better version of himself, and he had something truly worth living for. He was also now better trained and equipped for a real, meaningful life and to help other people face their challenges. This movie showed me that there could be a road to recovery, to a better life, even for somebody like me. It showed me that I did have a calling, a purpose, a way that I could contribute value to the world, even without any particular talent or special ability, and that somebody truly loved me, even now, in the dirty ruins of my life. All my years of bottled up pain came rushing out in a flood of tears. The final words of the closing song of the movie perfectly described how I was feeling, almost as if they had been written just for me. Listen to this. Something changed inside me, broke wide open, all spilled out, till I had no doubt that something changed. Never would I have believed it till I felt it in my own heart. In the deepest part, the healing came. Something so amazing in a heart so dark and dim. When a wall falls down and the light comes in, and I cannot make it, and I cannot fake it, and I can't afford it, but it's mine. As I walked out of the movie theater, I felt truly different in every way: physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. The broken, glitchy, guilt driven, obsessive compulsive pattern in my brain was miraculously healed. Literally, the part of my mind that kept going back to patterns over and over, that voice in my head that told me over and over that something bad would happen if people knew the truth, just disappeared. I remember praying, offering myself to God, asking Him to use me to help other people, asking for His forgiveness and His help, and for Him to come into my heart. This was followed by an indescribable encounter in the car on the way home, where I tangibly felt the presence of God, of the greatest creator of all, the one who created all the stars in the sky and all the beautiful, amazing things in the world, and yet somehow still thought he needed to make one of you and me. That meeting cannot adequately be described in words. The closest I can describe it is to say that if you could imagine all of the most incredible feelings of love and magnify them by a million times to such an extent that you could physically feel love, to such an extent that it could physically change you, that's what it felt like. I physically felt the love of God, and I felt it enter my heart. This incredible, loving, healing warmth spread from my heart throughout my body. Somehow, when it seems like nobody really cared, like I had no value, the God heard my cry for help, and He loved me so much, even at my worst, even at my darkest and most broken point, that He personally came to me to show me just how much He loved me, to wash away all the guilt, the shame, the mistakes I had made, the entire brokenness inside. That night, my life changed forever. I knew that I was loved more than I could ever have dared hope for, that I was valued, that everything was somehow going to be okay, that it was going to be a long, messy road of recovery, but that it was possible to rebuild my life, that it was worth it, and that I had a purpose in life if I chose to accept it, which was to help other people, and particularly other young people. I knew that making the choice to face the darkness and work through it would take a long, long time, and it would be the hardest and messiest thing I'd ever done. I knew that the choice to open my heart and feel again would be so painful, but I felt so much peace and confidence that it was somehow going to be awesome on the other side of it. My main journey of recovery took many years. Although I think the process of healing and learning and growing and being made whole is really a lifelong process. The old, toxic, broken foundations of my life had to be cleared away. Every parasite and toxic thing removed, the ground completely cleared, and then a new foundation had to be built in its place. It was a tough process, but it was so beautiful and so amazing and empowering and full of love and milestones and triumphs. It was so worth it. Looking back, I am glad I made the choice to live again, to face the long, hard road back out through the darkness and out into the light for all to see me as I truly am, imperfect by human standards, broken by sin and the storms of life, but a dearly loved masterpiece in God's eyes. There were four big pieces that helped with the process of rebuilding the structure of my life. The first was faith, through my newfound relationship with God and through the high school ministry I got involved with at my church. The next piece was a steady trickle of amazing, loving people God put into my life, either individually or in small groups, each for a period of time, who became like a second family to me. Another crucial piece of the structure of my life was my newfound purpose to help other people. God provided so many open doors for me to help people at summer camps, churches, schools, arts programs, and various other youth programs. Over the next 12 years or so, I volunteered all over the place in many different capacities. The great thing about volunteering is that I didn't have to be good at it. Programs were generally just really glad to have me there helping out. I was valued just for my willingness to participate, to help. It also gave me the chance to be included, to get to participate in activities and meet new people and try new things. More and more, I discovered activities and communities where every person was included and valued. Then finally, the last crucial piece of my new blossoming life structure was the performing arts. I really needed a fresh start, something totally different, a first step out of the darkness I had been stuck in. I was deciding between a couple of options, and I felt strongly, clearly led to audition for a theater show for the first time in my life. The idea of it was crazy. I had been viciously judged and mocked for so many years. I had been told so many times that I wasn't good at anything. Yet here I was, feeling led to walk into a theater with a bunch of strangers, to get up on a stage, to perform a monologue for the first time ever, and to let a panel of strangers judge me and probably tell me I wasn't good enough, just like so many other people had said to me about so many other things. I needed help to commit to that, and I found it when I happened to meet a nice grandfather of a family friend. He listened to my story, and he helped me talk through the decision, and he helped me commit to doing the audition. I will always be grateful to him and to God for sending him to me at that time. Long story short, I did the audition and it absolutely changed my life. I walked into that theater lobby and I immediately was welcomed into the social scene like I was a longtime friend. It felt like coming home to a second family I never knew I had. The audition was a little intimidating, but the supportive community and directors helped me through it. But something even more amazing happened. For the first time, I had discovered something in acting that felt like me, something I might actually be good at. Acting felt right, like it was part of me. Suddenly, that awkward, dorky, quirky, annoying, clownish, extroverted part of me that I had been forced to bury for so long was valued, not despised. This was a place where I didn't have to hide anymore. I could be my true self and actually be applauded for it instead of getting hurt. I was free and safe to try new things, to make mistakes and learn from them. Instead of getting objects and insults thrown at me, I got compliments. More than that, I was included, not excluded. I got the opportunity to participate just like everybody else, like a valued equal, rather than a shy, awkward, broken person who had zero experience or training or other qualifications. Beyond that, people actually seemed to enjoy playing with me. And nobody told me I wasn't good enough. Nobody said I wasn't welcome. Nobody said anything mean at all. I wasn't the most talented student in the room, but I was still included just like everybody else. Not just that, but I, the awkward, unattractive, dorky, overshadowed kid, got cast as a handsome, dashing, charismatic character who other characters naturally like and fall in love with, albeit before they find out he's actually the bad guy. But that's another story. That introduction to theater absolutely transformed the whole course of my life, and I will always be grateful to that cast and to the director. It was an amazing experience of creating an amazing show with a wonderful group of people in a safe, supportive, nurturing environment with a small cast that really became like a family to me. By the time we performed, I felt reasonably comfortable on stage, to the extent that I was able to step out and have fun performing on a big stage in front of a full theater packed with hundreds of people. It was incredible to see so many people coming out to cheer us on, and the thrill and affirmation of the applause at the end was overwhelming. To borrow a quote from the movie Wonder, I think everybody deserves a standing ovation at least once in their life. It truly is such an amazing act of validation and affirmation. The performing arts were an incredible tool for helping build new foundations for my life. I healed and grew emotionally, mentally, socially, spiritually, physically, and cognitively. Best of all, I got a clean slate every 3 months. Amateur theater shows here in the Bay Area run for about 3 months from the start of rehearsals to the end of the final performance. And then everybody goes their separate ways, and you don't see most of them or any of them ever again. That gave me a chance to work through the recovery process, to force myself to be brave and put myself out there again, over and over, to risk being judged by others, to open myself up again and again to new things, to new acceptance or rejection, to learn and grow and build new relationships for a few months, and then get a clean slate with a new production and a new group of people and start the process all over again. It was hard and painful to some extent to form friendships and become close with people only to have to say goodbye. But I really needed that 3 month window and the following clean slate. After everything I had been through, I struggled with developing healthy, lasting relationships and personal habits that were healthier for me emotionally, mentally, and in my relationship with God. I had the beginnings of a new, better me, but it was still just a glimmer in a timey-wimey, mixed up mess of the old, the new, lingering trauma responses, and unhealthy coping and defensive mechanisms. I was way behind in my personal development, my social development, and in my understanding of the world and of people outside the small bubble I had experienced before my whole life crumbled to pieces. I still had a lot of inherent distrust of people, of course, and there was still a fair amount of toxicity in my life that trickled out at times and affected those around me. I still had some of the same impacts of the still undiagnosed health condition, which continued to be a challenge for me in my relationships. I burned through a lot of connections. A lot of people initially liked me, but ultimately walked away with a negative perception of me. And I understand why. So much of that part of my life is not a good reflection of who I am today or who I am still becoming as I move forward. My heart had changed, but my emotional and social development processes were still very much under construction, with a lot of exposed rough edges. Looking back, I still wish I hadn't had to go through that messy development process in front of so many people, and especially at that age. But I also understand that there wasn't really a better way to do it. I had to get out there and experience things and learn from them. I couldn't just hide at home forever. Sometimes, if you really want things to change for the better, you have to be brave enough to walk the messy road of your most uncomfortable growth points. And you might have to do it in a way that's way more public than you want. That's just part of the process of re entering the crazy thing we call life after years of trauma, addiction, and brokenness. This is all the more true when you went through that stuff in your formative development years. So now you're playing catch up, working through things as a young adult that most people work through when they're teenagers and society is a little more understanding and forgiving. But the cool thing I can tell you now, being on the other side of the worst of that process, is that what lies on the other side is so worth it. Despite the messiness of the process, I am really glad I got to go through that. I'm a better person today for having gone through it. The more I worked through the challenges and the messes, the more I learned and improved and grew and healed. Over time, I learned that the performing arts can be tremendously therapeutic and can be used to help people in amazing ways. But I also learned that too often the traditional business models and methodologies used for those activities often end up being more destructive than helpful. And that even directors with the best of intentions often struggle to overcome the inherent flaws in the traditional business models that make it all but impossible to effectively help every individual person in the foundational and structural ways that they need to be helped. In 2011, about 5 years into my recovery process, and only about 2 or 3 years into my experience in the arts, I was given my first job as the theater teacher and director. I did that for about a year, and predictably, I struggled, as was common for me with new things, especially because, as you remember, I'm not the most talented person. But I also discovered how much I loved it. It was a whole new form of growth and opportunity for me, and a whole new way of helping other young people. Unfortunately, after my first two productions there, I was informed by my boss that I would be let go at the end of the year, so that they could look for somebody with more experience. As I was sitting in the middle of a final teachers' meeting, a thought suddenly came into my head that I should start a new nonprofit Christian youth theater program. This came out of nowhere, but it felt so right, and I found myself repeating it over and over in my head. It was such a crazy, out of nowhere thing that I knew it had to be from God. Again, remember that I only had a couple of years of experience as a performer at this point, and less than 1 year's experience as a director and theater teacher. And I had essentially just been told I was getting fired for my lack of experience. Yet here I was with this sudden calling to start a whole new program, even though I knew little about theater and practically nothing about starting any kind of business venture. But this calling was totally clear and it felt so right. I asked more experienced people for advice, expecting them to tell me it was a terrible idea, but nobody said anything of the kind. Everywhere I turned, all I got was support and open doors, with people willingly giving up as much as hours at a time to talk to me or to help in other ways. The idea took root and blossomed, and it ultimately led to the creation of a new program based around the concept of chrysalis experiences. These were designed to provide young people with foundational development experiences that would help them to blossom and thrive in a safe, nurturing environment, similar to the way that a butterfly chrysalis, also known as a cocoon, helps a vulnerable caterpillar transform into an amazing butterfly. This concept evolved into a program called Chrysalis Youth Theater, which went on to serve hundreds of young people in the Silicon Valley over the course of 5 years. Over time, we established a unique combination of play based learning, a teaching philosophy of customizing every day according to the needs of our students in the moment, a beautiful family style culture, and small groups of 25 students or less with all ages mixed together, led by 3 to 4 staff members. This all helped with our goals of customization, opportunities for every student to blossom and thrive, and virtually eliminating problems with bullying, cliques, exclusion, and other negative, toxic social patterns. Over time, this created a truly safe, nurturing experience of learning, developing, healing, and creating. Walls around and between people came down, divides were bridged, obstacles overcome, stagnation obliterated, and students' true inner selves emerged and shone so bright. It was incredible to see so many young people transform in front of my eyes. These young people would start out so stiff and stifled, so incapable at first of thinking and acting for themselves, with their true personalities buried behind the walls created by years of growing up in a culture where they're so often told to just sit still, to be quiet, to do as they're told, don't make mistakes, get things right. Gradually, our activities at Chrysalis would help those walls to crumble, allowing their true, authentic selves to emerge, along with true joy and laughter. Each small group of students became like a family, getting to know each other, to love each other, support each other, and work together to overcome challenges. Each student overcame challenges they faced personally, learning to be brave, to use their problem solving skills, to collaborate healthily with those around them. They learned that they could make mistakes without being embarrassed or ashamed, that making mistakes is actually a good thing that helps you to learn and grow. Communication skills improved. Students learned to be more aware of the body language of those around them and to adjust their behavior accordingly. Students who were destructively overexuberant learned to channel that in healthier ways, developing focus and control. I also learned and grew a lot. I learned to communicate better, to listen and observe better, to be a better teacher and director, to get better at identifying the unspoken underlying challenges that were holding students back in our classroom, and to help them overcome those challenges. I also learned not to take it personally when students act out, as their behavior may be a coping mechanism or a subconscious defensive measure or cry for help due to underlying issues that aren't obviously apparent. I should have already known that from my own experiences as a young person, but I realized that it's a very different lesson to learn from the other side as an adult trying to help a young person who you don't yet understand. Probably the most important lesson I learned was to never, ever prioritize the product over the students. There was always a temptation for theater directors to treat their kids like hardened professionals in the mad pursuit of creating the highest quality performances to impress ticket buyers, parents, donors, and sponsors. But at the end of the day, as someone who works with young people, my highest priority must be the healthy development of my students, even if that means creating a show that is more about giving kids opportunities to grow, as opposed to making the most money or impressing audiences. Although the truth is, as I discovered from experience, when you prioritize the healthy inner development of your students, they end up performing far better than they do otherwise. The result of healthy inner development and a healthy family culture is students who can give beautiful performances full of freedom, authenticity, passion, collaboration, and skill. Those first 5 years were a wonderful process of both helping young people and also doing a ton of research and development into best practices for healthy youth development using the arts. Over time, I learned so much about which practices are ineffective or destructive to healthy youth development, and which ones actually help the process in healthy and effective ways. I have a lot of stories from this time that I plan to share in future episodes of this podcast. About 3 years into Chrysalis, a seemingly random trip to a medical specialist revealed that I had an underlying medical condition that explained and validated everything that I had experienced and struggled with for most of my life. Specifically, I was finally diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease and a whole host of co infections. This was confirmed with an initial advanced blood test and later confirmed again and further illuminated with more comprehensive testing. Lyme and its related co infections are all so called invisible illnesses, which a person can have and be strongly affected by, but look totally fine on the outside. These kinds of illnesses are extremely common, but these illnesses are just as commonly missed because many doctors still use old, outdated testing methods that were developed decades ago when Lyme research was still in its infancy. Long story short, I underwent aggressive treatment. For as long as I could, I continued running Chrysalis, working other jobs, volunteering whenever possible, and performing whenever I could. But eventually, I had to let go of all of that and focus on my health, which opened the door to several years of me cocooning at home as I underwent treatment, continuing with the process of having the structures and foundations of my life rebuilt, and further researching and learning for the future relaunch of an expanded version of Chrysalis. I had gotten a vision in 2017 about the future of Chrysalis, and it included an image of a theater, completely deserted, shut down indefinitely, and I felt that it somehow represented other theaters. But I didn't understand what it meant until 2020 when doors started opening for the return of Chrysalis, in the midst of a global pandemic when theaters all over the world shut down indefinitely. Suddenly, that vision made total sense. Over the course of the pandemic, I spent a solid 9 months or so working with a team of advisors to do the appropriate research and write a new business plan for Chrysalis. We then spent 6 months or so launching a new nonprofit organization called Chrysalis Arts Ministries, which will be launching several ministries here in the Silicon Valley, including a modified version of our previous youth theater program, along with an online learning program to reach young people all over the world, and a local outreach program to take condensed versions of our experiences to young people at medical facilities, juvenile detention centers, and other places where young people are in need of Chrysalis experiences but cannot come to us. Beyond that, I hope to help other people launch Chrysalis programs in other communities. We still need a lot of pieces to come into place, and a lot of volunteers and donors, and we need some more key doors to open for us. But God has already been providing in amazing ways, and I am so excited to see what comes next. Hopefully, some of you can be a part of this exciting adventure as we move forward. And this podcast gives you a front row seat into the development process of this exciting program. That brings us to the present day in this podcast. I don't know what my future holds beyond this. I do believe God has an amazing vision for the future of Chrysalis, but I don't know what my health journey will look like. I may not ever be fully cured of Lyme disease. It may be something I just have to manage as best I can. There will certainly be other storms in my life, but I am now in a better place to withstand those storms, or at least to rebuild after them. I am so thankful and feel so blessed to be where I am in life at this point. Back in the darkest time, I never expected to make it this far, or to have such a wonderful life. I'm sure some people would expect me to wish I'd never gotten Lyme disease, or all the other storms I've had in my life thus far. But honestly, looking back, I am so grateful for all of it. Without those storms, I might be yet another Bay Area native madly pursuing achievement, defining my worth by what I achieve compared to everyone else, and by superficial external standards of value. I might never have developed strong foundations. I might never have learned to truly live or to truly love. Because of the storms, I now have a deeper a passion and appreciation for life. I have a deeper, more personal understanding and connection with people who have health challenges, disabilities, trauma, people who feel hurt or rejected or disillusioned with their churches, people who are lonely and depressed, people who are falling through the cracks of our society, people who our society fails to value and love the way they need it. God has worked through me to help people heal from trauma and get through challenges and see exciting breakthroughs and positive transformations. The list of blessings that has come with the storms in my life is overwhelming. I honestly wouldn't change any of it. I do wish I would have made better choices along the way. I regret many of the things I said and did in the past, but I'm a better person today for having gone through that. And I'm working all the time to learn and grow more, to love more, to be more understanding and empathetic, to do better at looking for people in need of attention and love. The reality is, God used the storms of life to help with the process of clearing away my old, broken foundations, revealing the truth about how weak they were, and to help with the process of shaping and refining my new, stronger, healthier foundations. Now I get to be in a position to help other people with building and maintaining their foundations. I used to feel unworthy to help other young people. But now I realize that it's actually because I have been through such overwhelming darkness, because I was completely broken, because I made all those mistakes, because I have had to dig so deep and work so hard and face so many of my fears and flaws and mistakes and inadequacies and prejudices to learn and grow and heal to such an extent for so long to become a functional, emotionally healthy, and happy human being, that I am now well positioned to help today's and tomorrow's young people to blossom and thrive and find their way through the darkness to true joy and love and freedom and creation. I'm not a celebrity. I'm not rich or famous in the way most people think about such things. I'm as flawed as anyone. But as my youth pastor once said, life isn't about waiting until you're perfect to help people. Life is about broken people helping broken people. Or as I would put it, God uses broken people to help broken people become whole. Truly, what a joy and what an honor it is. Thank you for listening to my foundation story. Now for a quick word of affirmation and a challenge for you to accept if you dare. For our word of affirmation today, I would like you to know that there is hope. There is meaning. You are so special and your life has tremendous value. You are also a hero. Each and every day, you are fighting battles that most people are completely unaware of. You might feel alone, but you aren't. You might not be able to see any light in your life right now, but I promise you that on the other side of that darkness is a light that will make the journey through the darkness so worth it. Places like Chrysalis exist to help you if you need it. It might not be easy for you to find the right people or places to help you with your particular storms, but keep looking. Now, one other thing we're going to do at the end of every episode is to leave you with a first step challenge to get you started with the principles we've just discussed. For today's challenge, I would like to challenge you to do an assessment of your foundations. Evaluate the people, programs, cultures, and daily habits of your life. Look at your relationships, your social media connections and habits, the music and movies and other entertainment you consume. Which things might be toxic and destructive to your foundations? Which ones are safe and healthy and nurturing, helping to bring out the best in you and contribute to your long term well being? Which ones help you develop healthier mindsets and daily habits? Which ones help to bring out the healthiest, truest, freest version of yourself so that you can blossom and thrive? If you're a leader, is your business contributing positively or negatively to the foundations and structures of people's lives? Are people blossoming and thriving because of your program? Or are they stagnant, toxic, unsupported, vulnerable, and falling apart. Do you even have any idea what condition the foundations of their lives are in? These questions are not intended as a judgment. Don't let the inner critic steal your joy. But please do take this opportunity to reflect on this concept and to think about what you can do to improve the situation for yourself and for those around you. Don't worry too much right now about what specific action to take with your foundation assessment. In our next episodes, we'll talk more about how to transform the different parts of your life. For now, just do the assessment and start to be more aware of the impact things have on you. And start thinking about the little things you can do each day to shift things in a more positive direction. I'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you for listening to Foundations. I would love to hear your foundation stories and the impact that the stories shared here are having in your life. You can submit voice memos on our Anchor podcast page, or you can email your stories to foundations@chrysalisartsministries.org. Check the description box on our podcast page for direct links. Have a wonderful day, and I'll look forward to speaking with you again on the next episode of Foundations.